Hello, friends. I'm facing my fears of drawing portraits, and I'm bringing you along with me as I fumble through it. I'm still learning and practicing the basics. Let's see how this goes. Oh, and before we get started, I'd love if you'd like, comment, subscribe, and watch till the very end because it really helps the channel. Okay, this is the photo I'll be using for reference, and I'm taking a slightly different approach this time. I watched this YouTube video by Kellogg's Loops showing how he breaks the face down into simple shapes. And I also watched a Skillshare class where he shows just the sketching process in a bit more detail. And I found both of these videos really helpful. If a technique like the Loomis method makes your brain hurt the way it does mine, check out the Kellogg's Loops video. I'll link it below. It's a much simpler method. Now, having said that, it still requires a decent amount of skill and a lot of practice. So I still found it challenging to figure out the right proportions and to know where to place things. Case in point, my first attempt at the nose was too big, so I had to redraw that shape. I'll be honest, I've done practically no portrait practice at all in the months since I posted the last portrait video, which is ironic because I'm always encouraging students to keep practicing because it's the only way to improve. But I guess on the other hand, it's also why I can relate to people who take my classes because I get it. Our brains want to resist doing something when we know it's going to be hard. And plus, things get busy and everyday life gets in the way. So yeah, I didn't try another portrait sketch until like 2 days ago. I used this same reference image for those practice sketches as well. And this was my first attempt, which was incredibly wonky. The proportions were just way off on everything. Then the next day I tried and it was an improvement. The proportions were better and it looked more like the reference, but I don't think I did a very good job with the shading. I think it was just a bit too smudgy and the values and everything were a bit muddy. So that's one of the things I want to try to improve with this version. I figured I'd rework the same drawing 2 or 3 times because it would give a real clear measurement of how I improved from one sketch to the next, what I did better, what still needs to be improved, and so on. I realized the eyes were too high and way too close to the eyebrows, so I dropped those down quite a bit, and I continued to move things around throughout this process. Of course, one of the big benefits of working digitally is that it's pretty easy to make those changes. With the eyes in a better position, I started working out the details. I still haven't figured out the trick to drawing eyelashes. I don't know, they always end up looking overly dramatic. I mean, to be fair, the eye makeup in this reference is fairly dramatic. I'm pretty sure she's wearing a set of falsies. But when I draw them that way, it ends up looking a little cartoony. I wonder if my brush size is too big. Anyway, then I started to define the other features, like adding a bit more shape to the nose. I tried to make the lips more accurate, but I don't think I quite got it right. It still surprises me that lips are so challenging to draw. Then I sketched in the shape of the face. This model has a square face and fairly angular jawline, but she still looks really soft and feminine. So I had to try to strike that balance in the drawing, which was kind of tricky. All right, on to the eyebrows. And once I finished filling those in, I could see that the eyes were still too high on the face and too close to the brows, so I moved those yet again. Next, I drew the ears. The neck and shoulders, and added a little detail on the blouse. The next step was to add a more detailed outline of the hair and the hairline, which of course helps to frame the face and pull everything together. Then it was time to focus on the shading. Like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to try a different approach so my sketch wouldn't end up looking so muddy. So rather than smudging, I attempted to use hatching instead. I don't really do a lot of hatching, so I started with a really light touch until I got a little more comfortable in the small areas. And the challenge came when there were much larger areas to fill. I struggled with keeping my lines consistent at this length, so there was a lot of trial and error here. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that I'm using a different pencil this time. I decided to try Waratah for this sketch. I didn't love this brush the first time I tried it, but it has grown on me so much recently. And I'm using it here because the grain is really fine and it creates nice smooth marks. So I found it made it easier for me to get cleaner lines with the hatching. In my last portrait video, I used Huntsman, which has become my favorite pencil for the kinds of loose organic sketching that I usually do. But I realized it was a bit too grainy for portrait sketches, at least for me, and at this stage of my learning process. Maybe I'll feel differently once I build my skills and start leaning into more stylized portraits, but for now, yeah, the grain on Huntsman was kind of throwing me off a little bit. The other reason I chose Waratah is because it gets really dark really quickly. Now, when I did my brush review, I actually found this feature to be frustrating, but I'm learning to use it to my advantage now. In this case, it made it really easy to add value contrast on some details like the ears and to get a nice deep black for the hair. These shadows on the neck are a good example of how the value range on this brush was really helpful for getting a nice dark shadow, as well as a mid-range value and a lighter value. And I was able to achieve that just by adjusting the amount of pressure I used. Rather than erasing the shape, I used white to draw the septum ring, and I did that on a different layer. Added a couple lines of shadow, and that was it. All right, let's compare to the reference photo. My proportions are still a little off. The spacing and angle of the eyes is not quite right. In the reference, I think her head is angled maybe back very, very slightly, but it's indiscernible until you try to draw it. The shape of the mouth on my drawing is different, and I might have overcorrected the nose and made it a little too small. I do feel better about the shading on this one. It's cleaner and you get a better sense of where the light is hitting the face. I think I'll use this hatching approach more often, but I do need to practice drawing the lines evenly. When I compared this drawing to my first two attempts, I'd say this one was an overall improvement. I do feel like I captured something more in the second sketch. I can't put my finger on it, but it feels more, I don't know, more spirited, like there's more personality there in that second sketch, even despite all the proportion issues. But I do think that my technique improved a bit on the third sketch. What do you think? Do you think sketch number 3 is more successful than sketch number 2, or vice versa? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.